Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Literature,
where we apply the revolutionary Mott skill
to classic and contemporary works of prose.
So, join us once again, won't you?
Hello there, and welcome back to this year's Mott's-a-Ween 2018. Tonight we are doing Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, although writing under a pseudonym of Don A. Stuart. I, of course, remain Scott Thurlow, your non-changing host, here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Or am I?
Mm-hmm. And Stephen Amosi.
Yeah, hello.
And Christopher Morgan.
Hi.
Mm-hmm, good one. Well, with that in mind, I'll go to the logline with this one. So, just a quick backstory, in case anyone doesn't know. This is the story that The Thing, John Carpenter's movie, was based on, and a couple other things. There was an adaptation in the 50s, but given the nature of the story, I'm going with 30 men and an alien. So we'll get to that, but we're going to go to Chris now with the plot.
Basically, it's about 30 guys down in the Antarctic, and they find an alien spacecraft, and they find this blue thing with 3 piercing red eyes, and they bring it back, and they learn it starts taking people over, and the rest of the story is basically who is the thing and who's not the thing, and I think that's basically it.
Yeah, that's more or less it, sure. So, here's the thing about this story, I guess I'll say to me. And Chris Wormit, so this is the first time I've read it. I'm a huge fan of the Carpenter movie, possibly one of my favorite horror movies and of Carpenter's, but I never read the original source material that it was based on. So, having now read it, Chris had mentioned to me like previously that it's a little dry. And yeah, maybe that goes to style, but that also bleeds over into like how the plot unfolds, for me at least. So I think I'm looking at like a 2-ish. So I'll toss it to you guys, but that's my initial impression.
Okay, so I have my experience with this through the Carpenter movie as well. It starts off as a dry version of a Michael Crichton work.
Yeah.
With heavy science and exposition.
Yeah. You're right.
Goes into a fairly good, thrilling horror,
paranoia plot. Yeah.
Who's the alien?
Who is it?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. And then it's an incredibly abrupt ending that's almost, you could imagine on the screen, the end with a question mark coming in. For the middle is superb. And oddly enough, doesn't have as many fatalities as the Carpenter
It's not as gruesome,
does,
I guess, in that sense, sure.
But it's still very,
tense throughout.
Throughout most of it. So I'm going to give it a lot of credit for that, but because the first two, the first and the last parts, I have to give it a soft 2.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking at. What do you think, Steve-O?
You know, I didn't have quite the same experience as you guys had. I understand where you're coming from with the, slow opening, but maybe this is, because I like the Crichton-esque type of story. I actually enjoyed the beginning when they were talking about, what could this possibly be? Even though, obviously, the science is dumb and silly because it's 1938, 38, 39, whatever. 38. And it's not quite all there with what it could be, but, I really enjoyed that part of, explaining what's going on, scientifically, and then going into the rest of the plot was, as you said, the middle, the who is it, as opposed to who done it, I guess, is really cool to me. I really like that. And I didn't mind the end. I think I'm going to give it a 3.
Here's what's really funny to me, though, in the beginning, is when McGreedy is talking about how they found it, and they blew up the spaceship with thermite.
That's the best thing they could think of to do.
That part was a little bit different. I didn't realize that spaceship was all fucked up and done for the first 2 paragraphs of describing what was happening. Yeah. That I will knock a little bit.
It goes to your questionable science thing you just said.
But I think I still do like it enough to give it a 3 for the plot.
Okay.
I think I'm going to stick with that.
You think, Chris?
I'm definitely giving it a 2. I was the beginning definitely did not. It was necessary, but there's a lot of exposition. I mean, that is pretty much the driest part. And besides that, and this is going to come down to dialogue for me, but I don't feel like, I think because a lot of it was told through dialogue, it really didn't capitalize on the suspense that it could have. But by the same token, as a story, in a lot of ways, it really was ahead of its time. It was kind of vicious and gory more than I thought it would have been, given this is the second time I read it. I haven't read it in like 20 years, and I've got it on audio and I've listened to it a couple times. And rereading it, I definitely have to give it a 2 without question.
All right, I feel you. Like, so just to cap off, like, yeah, you're right. The Crichton angle is a good one because, like, it basically starts, as you said, like, as you know, and like he has to explain like everything that's happening. So like, it's fine enough. So I'm sticking with the 2, but I see what you mean.
And I will say, I actually really loved how dark this story was, as opposed to like a lot of other things that I've read from that same time frame, right? Like, that just didn't seem like this.
It's not as positive.
Flinch away from the dark psychological aspects of what was going on there.
Sure.
Well,
and I love that.
He attempted to kill himself and failed. We know he's not an alien.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great.
Yeah, it's pretty good line.
The guy, when he kills the Kennel or whatever his name is, when I forget who kills him. Whoever kills Kennel, like, because he's been like, praying loudly and singing for hours, and it turns out he was an alien anyways. They're like, oh, well, lucky you fucking killed him, but I guess you just killed an inhuman monster, so you're fine.
Yeah, you're a murderer, but actually you saved us. So thank you. But sure. All right, well, let's move on to themes with you, Steve-O.
Themes, I think, are very interesting in this short story. It's the battle between who you know and who you think you know. It's the idea of, do you know the people closest to you, even if you've been camped out with them for months or however long it's been? And the other question that I think comes into this that gets a little bit glossed over, but they definitely address, is, do you know yourself? Like, can you know, in terms of this story, like, can you know yourself that you're not the alien, right? Like, you may be such a good clone that you don't even know enough about yourself to...
Characters do struggle with that, yeah.
Right. And they don't quite go into it a ton, but there is that little
it's contained
spark of that, and I really love that type of theme. So, I mean, that's, for me, those 2 are enough. I'm sure there are other little themes in this as well, but I'm going to leave it to you guys.
Okay.
Little themes. There's a very bold discussion in here about what the limits of science and also an Earth bias. So
human-centric.
Human-centric. They go, obviously the alien could not survive this long, protracted, frozen...
Based on what we know about Earth life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except it did, because this doesn't run anything like life on Earth. And this, throughout, it shows that there is a myopic view that a lot of these, like, very intelligent scientists, physicists, biologists, all go into it. And in fact, one of the characters, a physicist who's arguing against thawing it, does so based on psychology. Like, I just have a bad feeling about it. Yeah. We shouldn't unthaw it. And they're like, well, you can't base your based
science
on emotions.
Feelings, yeah.
Except he was right. Like, he was right to have that. So I think it's kind of a really, like, again, as a bold look at how we would deal with an extraterrestrial and all of the assumptions we'd make based on what we know here.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm taking it down to its basic theme, which is hysterical paranoia of the unknown. I mean, the thing is, I know it sounds very trite what I'm saying, but...
No, I mean, it's a classic human fear.
But the one thing is, people generally won't act stoically. And especially if you're down, somewhat isolated down in Antarctica. And I thought it captured that pretty well. I mean, because you definitely have the science where they're like, oh, let's thaw this thing out. And you've got people like, no, are you fucking kidding? Are you kidding me? We're going to do that. No way. And I thought it really examined a good approach of the way humans do attack deal with the unknown, and especially in this context where they're isolated, it is a direct threat. And then the people who are like, well, we have to look beyond ourselves. What would this do to the rest of the world? I thought it was really well-rounded in terms of the human approach to it. So I'm definitely going to give it a 1.
Yeah, not much more to add. I think you guys covered a lot of it. Like, it's all pretty strongly woven throughout. And I was going to, like, it's funny because normally you would say, like, oh, it's sort of like a metaphor, allegory for, like, Red Scare, like, era. But it was written much before that even happened. So you can't really say that. But I think what you said, Chris, sort of broadly applies anyway, like where the human fear of the unknown and human-centric viewpoints trying to deal with something that is beyond our knowledge, more or less. So yeah, I think it's all pretty strong enough, and I'll give it a 1.
Yeah.
All right, that'll bring us to Antagonist with you, E.
Oh, building off what I said in themes, it's all the humans involved in that. I mean, imagine you wake up in a from a protracted sleep where you're frozen for a very, very long time, thousands of years, and all of a sudden, like
unfrozen caveman alien.
Yeah, and you're trying your best to get home. Like these creatures you never heard, like you never saw before, blew up your ship.
Yeah.
You're trying to build an anti-grav thing to
get the fuck off this frozen planet, or just at least this frozen place that you hate.
Yeah, like, and as we pointed out also, that these people know nothing, even though they're scientists. So I don't know. I think that there's a good case that can be made that we shouldn't be Earth-centric and think the humans are the villains. But also, if you want to view the Thing as the villain, I think a very interesting enemy as it takes over. It takes over your friends. This will later be used for a lot of Cold War stuff,
like body snatchers, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
But pop people. But I thought this was early and again a very well done version of that.
To me, this goes into my antagonist, where I would often say that antagonists can also be a catalyst. And I kept thinking of the line in the movie where, McCready says, he wakes up probably not in the best of moods. And I really got that. Like the alien was kind of like, I got a sense that the Thing was kind of pissed off. And they made it
pretty clear.
Yeah, but there was a weird spite aspect of it. Like he was the antagonist. It was the antagonist. It was a catalyst that brought out everything in humanity. And I have to give it a 1 because because obviously without it wouldn't there would be no story. But I think it effectively drew out, even if you're considering humans as one of the antagonists, this still works. This still works, and it was to me one of the strongest aspects of the story.
I do enjoy that take on it, and I really like that, and I think it's interesting. There's one line in the story where they say something like, "It doesn't seem like it has to be aggressive. It just bides its time and waits until it has a chance to take over and take over and take over." It's never been in a fight per se, right? It's just has to
wait for its opportunity.
Yeah, it just has to slowly take over, and that aggression is not in its nature, which I thought was a really interesting and poignant line, and that might even speak to themes to an extent. Where it's like humans are expecting a threat to be this aggressive,
direct confrontation
that's going to come fight them, but that's not what this is. It's a slow taking over of their entire camp.
It's a terrified being who is 1 against 30. He needs to slowly work his way. He's a solid snake of aliens, whatever.
Sure.
So I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think you can get all points out of that, all angles, and I think they all work because of the divide, the conflict, if you will, the setup between it, even if it's not, like you said, Steve, a direct conflict with this quote-unquote monster. All right. Well, that'll bring me to protagonists. So this is kind of a weird one because there's a lot of characters. There's I think they said there's 37 people on this installation, and 12 of them have a part to play throughout the story. But I suppose McCready is one of the major ones. He's introduced early. He's comes up with all of the plans. They often look to him to figure out what's going on, as well as the biologist. There's a whole bunch of character names which I'm not going to remember offhand, but I'm calling maybe 2 or 3 of them, like the core like group members who like do like it focuses on them the most. You follow their action, you follow what their plan is, what they're doing, how they're handling it, and like how they adapt to like as the situation changes. So I think they made like I always say that the characters in the movie, The Thing, made like the smartest moves ever to make in such a situation in a horror movie. Not so much in this story, like not the opposite or anything, just not as like competent. But like you said, Sign of the Times, like it was written knowing what was known of science at that point and how like the author thought that humans might react to a situation like this. So I think overall it might be a soft one, but I think they were characterized pretty well. They're described like nicely. They certainly had their quirks and like what their personalities were like to an extent. So I think it deserves, at least for me, enough for a decent one.
Yeah, I mean, I am pretty in line with your thoughts on that. I think that's kind of they made fine choices. There were a bunch of scientists. What I liked about it was they decided amongst themselves to like make a bunch of tests, trying to figure out what this thing was, trying to figure out if there was a way that you can tell who was a doppelganger and who wasn't, stuff like that. So in terms of that, I liked the protagonists. That being said, they really blended into each other.
That's a good point.
It's tough to like looking back on it.
To differentiate them.
Yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, and it's tough to remember who was who just off the top of my head.
McCready was bronze.
He was
Norris
bronze.
was steel.
Yep.
All right. And that's all you really need to know for character
There were
development.
12 other characters.
No, but I think that they do set up McCready as, I would say, the focal point.
So a de facto main one,
Once Gary, and then he initially gives a speech about what's going on. When Gary might be an alien, who was the former leader, he takes over to be in charge. So I think, again, you're right that there's other characters involved who have major points, but I think that he was
the major focal. Yeah,
he's like most like blue collar, like
yeah.
Well, he was
like Paul Bunyan
pilot,
out there,
right?
yeah.
Was that,
he was a meteorologist.
Who was the pilot?
He had another name too.
Van something.
Oh
Yes.
You're right.
But in the movie, of course, they conflate them like McCready is a pilot. So, but in this story, they're separate.
Yeah.
But still one then.
It's kind of hard for me. I was trying to decide because I don't really see a distinct protagonist. It is definitely shared. I think I'm going to give it a 0 because I think I'm going to put this more into supporting.
I can see that angle. I was debating it myself, but I think I sort of convinced myself. But I think that's a valid angle to take as well. So why don't you continue on, Chris, with speaking of, with supporting.
I'm definitely going to give this one. It definitely was an ensemble play.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't quite, I mean, this, I don't know where this fit into the 10 Little Indians trope, but it definitely was an ensemble piece. Because every bit of the, going back to the point of paranoia and the point of humanity and science, everything draws, the themes and everything draws from the interactions, and I can't see any one character removed from any other character. I don't really see the need. I took a point away from the protagonist, but I think that was kind of by design, and I think it was a smart move to make. So I'm definitely going to say this is a very strong one for me, because I felt that this really was a really great ensemble piece. There was 32 people in this camp, and they really focused on a core 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And I think he approached it really, really intelligently. So it's definitely giving a very strong 1 for me.
I just have a quick. So you said ensemble play. Have they ever made the play?
No, but they fucking should.
They should. I mean, it's
like a musical.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
I'd say we
or
do
just
it
a
as a
stage play.
I mean, I keep trying to
Let's write
avoid
it.
bringing in Carpenter's the thing, because I mean that literally is one of my favorite movies. But Carpenter did definitely make McCready the protagonist and really used the 10 Little Indians model.
Sure.
And this did not. It took a
Is that
different
an offensive trope name?
approach. It's an Agatha Christie.
I apologize.
It's an Agatha Christie. It's an Agatha Christie.
So
Yes.
So
probably, yeah. But I mean, that is the
All right.
I can't defend Agatha Christie's racism.
We'll move on. I'll just give my thoughts on it. So, like, yes, you're right, because it's like a larger cast. It has to like devote time to a number of them, if not all. Like that would be impossible, I would think. But like you said, the 6 to 7 or so, half dozen that he does give some characterization to, and like explains what's happening and when, as they figure out like more of what the thing is doing and who or is and is not, or may have been taken over. Like, I think they're characterized well enough, even though like they might be like 1.5 dimensional. Like they do, as you said, have a part to play, and sort of each one relies on the others to an extent to figure out what's happening, even when it's revealed they're a thing. So I think it's just enough over the line for me for like maybe a soft 1, but still a 1.
Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. I don't know. I think it's I think it's I liked. Here's the thing. I liked all the characters, but looking back on it 2 days later, I can't remember who any of them were.
I get you.
Like, I'm trying to remember like what specific ones like qualities were, other than like the main 3, I guess, or 4. You know, I can remember the guy that was actually. You know what? I take that back a little bit. Like, I remember the guy who was in the kitchen, like spouting
he was the
off,
cook.
like the cook. I remember the guy that was like Blair, who was
locked in the shed.
Got locked away immediately because he was going crazy. I remember, McCready and yeah. So
you remember more than you
granted, some of these guys I probably put into protagonists, and some like they kind of like swap protagonist supporting parts for me in my head, and I don't know if that means it's strong or weak. Ian, let me know. I'll give my score after you.
It's weird because I view McCready as the
main one
there, so that leaves me a lot more people to work with for. And the thing is, I remember Blair and Norris arguing over whether they should open Thought or not. The cook, the
Connet not wanting
the Connet who I don't know is right after the alien escapes. He was so awkward that I knew immediately he was an alien. But like I remember a lot of people and things, so I have to give it a 1 because I thought it was, and a lot of the tension in this is built around a couple of characters in a room together discussing what's happening, and thus it's very character driven. And I have to give it a 1.
It is, and I'm gonna. The one thing about McCready tells the beginning of the story, and Van Wall, tells the end of the story, and it's really funny the way the exposition is told a lot through the dialogue, but everybody to me takes the baton and runs with it. So,
okay, does that convince you either way, Steve-O?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 1. It's a softer one, but it's I think it's strange because I think the supporting characters are pretty strong, but based on the fact they blend together,
the way
it's softer.
The way it shakes down.
You know what I mean?
No, I got you. Well, that'll bring us to dialogue with you.
So dialogue is an interesting thing here. I feel like, I don't know how you guys are gonna go on it, but I liked the dialogue in this story. I thought that some of the more tense conversations were really tense.
Yes.
And I really loved that about it, and based just on that, I would give it a 1. But I also like the discussion between scientists about science things, and like whether like, this physicist's bad feeling about this was gonna ever overrule the biologist saying it could never happen. I love that interplay that they had. So in terms of dialogue, I'm gonna give it a pretty strong 1. I like it kind of a lot, actually.
So I have an issue that I really like the dialogue too in parts. The opening to me though is such a barrier that I can see people not
turning off.
Continue. Yeah. Just I'm not going to read the rest of this. It took me a couple of tries to sit down and get through and once I got to the tenser moments with Alien, Like, it was a hell of a read, and because that could be a barrier to entry, I have to give it a 0.
That's a super fair point. And I was wavering on this one kind of because of that very thing. Because you're right. Like, at least I agree to it that it sets the bar. Like, the way it introduces you into it, like, okay, it's kind of dry. Like, and it opens up. And yeah, like, I mean, like you said, Steve-O, a lot of like the impact of it is the tense conversations between characters once it's all been set up. And so those are pretty solid. Although not always, but more often than not, they are. So, like, I'm somewhat wavering. So, Chris, if you got anything, what do you think?
This is going to come down to one of those things where if it weren't for the dialogue, there wouldn't really be a story, because the least interesting parts for me with Campbell is, and this is part of the reason it is dry read, and I agree with you 100%, Ian, that McCready's opening narrative is probably the weakest part of the dialogue. But I found the dialogue stronger, even though the dialogue was a lot of the storytelling, a lot of the exposition. I felt that when it came to descriptions, Campbell's descriptions away from the dialogue were also very weak. So I feel without the dialogue,
it falls apart. Sure.
The story would have fell apart. So from a narrative standpoint, I'm definitely giving this 1.
Yeah, I think it's really funny. I was exhausted when I started reading this story, and then I ended up reading the entire thing in one go. But like, when I started reading it, I was exhausted, and I was super, like, this is going to sound strange to say, but I was very interested in what was going on in the beginning of this story, but I was also, like, falling asleep while reading it because it's, like, tough and, like, it's just kind of exhausting to read the beginning of the story. So I get exactly what you mean, and, like, I don't judge you at all for giving it a 0 if you're going to go with a 0 for like, based on that, because it was, like, it's difficult. Like, I liked it. Like, I was like, oh, this is kind of setting the stage for everything. Like, I get what's going on, but at the same time, I was like, oh my god, I felt myself, like, my head, like, tipping, and I, like, I had to look back up, because I started reading it at, like, 10 o'clock, and it was a long day. It doesn't matter. But
your state of mind.
Tell us about your day, Steve.
I think that, listen, you don't want to hear about my day. It's all filled with...
I want to hear about the story.
It's all filled with turning into dogs and shit. But no, I liked that whole thing, but I could see where you're like, this is a barrier to entry, and I could see giving it a 0 for that. So I'm going to stick with a 1, but that's a very good point. And Chris, very good point as well.
All right, so let's go to style, and that'll be Yui.
So, Antarctica as a setting is one of the great, like,
frontiers.
We brought up Michael Crichton before. This reminds me a bit of Sphere, which, again, the deep sea is also one of those great frontiers that we haven't explored, and what exists in those places that are still left unexplored. And I think it handles the isolation and also the problems faced with dealing with extreme temperatures and extreme locations. And overall, that kind of horror I really enjoy, and I think that it carries through throughout this work. And so, genre-wise, perfect.
Completely agree with that. I think that it's that those places that you can be entirely, cut off. So Antarctica or those Arctic regions work really well. Deep sea, space. Mm-hmm. I think the next really good one that we need to have for this is an inner space movie where just cut off and shrunk down to tiny, and it's just
Ant-Man 3.
Yeah, exactly. I'm waiting for
Quantum Realm.
The Quantum Realm. It would be awesome.
Sure.
But it's. I think you're absolutely right. Like that just sets up a great. That's a great setting for a good horror movie. Mm-hmm. Just a very psychological way to cut off contact and see what happens to people when they are cut. Just imagine what happens to people when they're cut off.
But it also allows, since they're unexplored, it's a place where like the fantastic
strange things
can
can still
Sure.
exist. Yeah, and especially in your in your mind. And like, yeah, I agree. That's fantastic. And the description of the thing in all its various descriptions throughout this story were really good too. I really enjoyed. I thought that the story just did a really good job of kind of making you feel what the members of this expedition were feeling, and I have to give it credit in terms of style for that.
This story is the archetype for as you know, for Sphere, for Alien. It works within the story, and I think that is a very, very important point, that it is someplace that is alien even on this planet, and it leaves you with the sense where you are cut off, but there is always that part of you that, yes, but there is a chance one way or another that it can get back to a population. And what?
You have to have hope. I mean,
yeah, you have hope, but you also have the threat of, global annihilation in one way or form. And I think it was really a smart move, especially consider the time. And I definitely have to give style a 1. I thought it was just, I agree with everything you guys had said regardless.
It's odd because I don't think I'm going to give it a 1, and I guess here's why. Yes, it's a good setting. You're right, for all the reasons you guys just said. However, the way it's actually, like, the way he writes about it in the story, so I think I'm getting all the points that I gave to dialogue, I'm kind of taking away here, because I'm surprised no one's mentioned it, or maybe I'm not, but I will bring it up that it's Mountains of Madness, like, kind of more or less, like even that kind of thing, which was done before this, and yes, also in Antarctica, but because of the dryness of the stuff that surrounds the important and interesting dialogue, I think for me it falls on the 0 side, even though I agree, like, yeah, he used a good framework, but like just reading some of the stuff like that, again, that sort of, that connected it together, the connective tissue, if you will, Chris, as you like to describe, for me it didn't really get there as much, so that's why, that's my one coming on a 0 on, but I see you guys' point, but for me, just personally, not quite up to snuff is all. Alright, so that will bring me finally to recommendation, which is weird because I did recommend it for this season's Halloween, and because of the fact that I'd never actually read it, even though I love the adaptation of John Carpenter's adaptation so much, I'm still wavering on it, so I'm going to hold off on my score. What do you guys think?
I recommend it, and to be honest with you, it's, if you're going to go historically in terms of science fiction, the writing, I agree with you 100%, is a product of its time. I mean, early Asimov. I mean,
it's always going to be, but
it's going to be dry. And yeah, I even said this to Scott right off the bat. However, I mean, it is a good story. It's a story to read for historic importance, for narrative importance. However, I'm going to recommend that there's an audio version that's actually a play that actually works that really works better. So I recommend it as a story, but I would suggest, reading
the format in which you would engage with it.
I'd say reading it. Yeah. I'd say to read it to give you some grounding, but to actually listen to it as an audio play really brings, because so much of the story is through dialogue, it really elevates the story.
Brings it to life.
Yeah, so I have to recommend it. I recommend reading it, and then definitely I have it on audio, and I listen to it more on audio than I've
reread it.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I would love to read this, or I would love to listen to this as an audio play. I think that'd be really cool. However, as a short story, I would also very much recommend reading it. I really enjoyed it. If you are a fan of The Thing and you want to, check out the initial short story that came from, check it out. If you just want like kind of a interesting science-y sci-fi horror story, check it out. I thought it was a good read, and it's what is it, like 40 pages?
It's about 30. It's just under 40, I think.
I thought it was good. I enjoyed it a lot, actually. I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to. So I would say definitely check it out. I would recommend it.
This is tough because I did enjoy the work, but I think this is also a case where the movie is better than the source material. And I'd recommend The Thing any day over this work. So this is going to be a 0, but if you enjoy The Thing and want to read the source material, go for it. If you sci-fi and you just get through the first 5 pages or so, and it gets better. But overall, movie over the literature.
Yeah, that might have convinced me because I know we try to keep it separate, but the fact remains that even though I did technically suggest this one, I didn't read it beforehand, so I wasn't sure what to expect going into either. So I think at the end of the day, yes, you can sort of appreciate for what it did, but I think other things have moved beyond it, and I certainly would say if someone said, should I read it or should I watch The Thing? I would say absolutely watch The Thing and don't worry about reading it. It's fine. It's again, they improved upon it.
Thing, radio play,
yeah,
original
or
story.
yeah, apparently. So I would probably agree with that. So I think I'm just going to not quite recommend it, even though it was fine to read it. But I think there are much better things, and again, the film stands at this point better than the original source material. All right. So I might need some help here.
I've got it. If you
I will give you the final scores though. Sivo, you gave it a perfect 10. In fact, which, as you said, you sort of wasn't. You might give it ended up giving a higher score.
I didn't know if I was going to give it a 10, but I definitely liked it a lot.
Yeah. Chris, you gave it an 8, and Ian and I have settled on 7s, which gives us an 8. An 8 overall. Yes. Yeah. All right. You know what? That's fine. It's still pretty fucking solid, but again, not need to be read. But if you do, you'll probably have a good time with it. Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for this season's Matsawin literature pick. I've been Scott Thurlow. I've been here with Jonathan Ian Manzer.
I've been the alien all along.
Yes, I knew it. I'm Stephen Amosi.
I always wanted to know.
And Chris Morgan.
If we have any surprises for any of us, I don't think any of us is in a position to do anything about it.
Indeed. And I'll be building my anti-grav belt. See you next season. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Christopher Morgan. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.